Hello.
Yeah, Mr. Sanyang.
This is Ali Sanyang.
Yes.
From Gambia.
Okay.
Are you hearing me?
Yeah, we are already in the program. We are about to start. I am Suleiman. I'm the host of the program. You can read me privately inbox, and now we're starting the program now. Sorry about that. Okay, good afternoon, listeners, ladies and gentlemen. We are here again, Saturday, the 19th of June, 2021. The time is just gone 7 minutes past 3 in the afternoon in Birmingham, England. And this is to about 7 minutes past 2 in the Gambia. We are back again on the dialogue on diaspora voting 6th. This is the 6th edition of the diaspora voting programs we have. And the topic today will be the role of journalists in election cycle, the role of the media journalists in an election cycle. And we have speakers.
Recording in progress.
We have invited speakers both in the Gambia and the diaspora. And those speakers would be Demba Balde from Gainako, Flex Dan Civil Society, Baba Black Job, Diaspora Radio, Demba A. Jawo, veteran journalist and former information minister, Mohamed S. Bag, Vice President of the Gambia Press Union, Mustafa A.K. Dabo, Maligan investigative journalist, Fatou Jain, human rights advocate, Alu Famara Sanyang, media practitioner. And the programs again are organized by the Civil Society Consultation Team with partnership with Duga, Right to Know, Gambia House, and MSDG Project. And this program is smallcast on Block TV, Gainako Radio, Diaspora Radio, Fatu Radio, and Mamos Radio, and various social media platforms. And we are going to start the program by inviting the guest speakers to introduce themselves. And from there on, I'll ask the questions and the follow-up questions around the table. And I will start with Babu Ablai Job to introduce himself, and we pick it up from there. Babu. Babu?
Hello?
Yeah, Babu.
Yes, can you hear me, Ben?
Yes.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. What was the question again?
No, I said introduce yourself, and I will start. Yeah, from you, and we go around the table.
Oh, thank you.
Am I supposed to use this forward?
Okay, I'm hearing, oh. Yeah, I am Babu Abdullah Job of Diasporium, and I'm glad to join the host of panelists here on my fellow media colleagues to discuss on the importance of the journalism or the media during elections. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you and good morning to all of you.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Sanyang. Mr. Sanyang, welcome to the forum. And if you want to introduce yourself,
You can still this one.
Mr. Alufama Sanyang. Mr. Alufama Sanyang. Okay, we'll move to Mustafa K. Dabo. Mr. Sanyang is not hearing us. Mustafa.
Thank you. Mustafa K. Dabo. I write for Malagan online newspaper. Glad to be with you on this very important topic. Well, we involved in accountability issues, and accountability probably one of the most important instruments is election periods, and I'm glad to be with you on this platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. Fadjan Senghor.
Thank you, Ben. I'm very happy to be here with all the panelists to share some reflection on this topic.
Did we have Flex done in the panel? On the panel, Flex? Yusuf Taylor? Okay, Flex is
Yes,
not.
hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Flex.
Yes.
Go ahead.
This is Yusuf Taylor, commonly known as Flextan, a Gambian journalist. I returned home in 2018 towards the end, and practicing journalism following the electoral act and the electoral reforms overall, generally. Sorry, I'm somewhere very noisy. Just came from a public engagement where we were talking to the Gambians in Brikama and Willingara with the Gambia Press Union about the elections and the access to information on elections. So I'm just coming from there on my way, but I'm following. I will be coming in to make participations. Apologies for the noise you may hear in the
Thank you
background.
very much. Thank you very much, Flex. Thank you very much. Mr. Demba, Ali Demba Jao. Is Mr. Jao with us?
Not yet, Flex.
Okay. Let me try and get Demba Balde. Demba Jao is not with us. Try and get Demba Balde. From Gainako. Okay. Demba might not be with us too. They will join us. Once more, let me just try Mr. Aliu Fama Sanyang because he's with us here. Provided he can hear us now. Mr. Sanyang. Unfortunately, Mr. Sanyang is not responding. We have to start this program. And if you bear a minute, we start the program with the first questions.
Suleiman, sorry to interrupt. Just before you go, good afternoon, ladies from the UK. Good afternoon or good morning, our listeners. This is Suleiman's co-host of the day. My name is Elizabeth Sosa-Cisse. Suleiman, we also have Mr. Sam Sar on the panel with us.
Okay.
Mr. Sam Sar, can you please welcome and please introduce yourself for the benefit of our listeners? Mr. Sar, can you hear us?
Probably someone would just inbox them to find out, let them check their connections. I know they're connecting from the Gambia. That might be a problem.
Okay, Suleiman, I guess you can start with the questioning, and as and when they join, we'll give them the opportunity to introduce themselves to our listeners.
Thank you. And elections are upon us again. How prepared are the journalists considering the role of the media practitioners? The role of the media in providing information to electorates. Mr. Dabo, from looking from the ground, how prepared you think the journalists are?
Well, that's a very complex question and difficult probably to answer. Mm-hmm. I think that media in this country has a lot of challenges, and it's facing a lot of challenges. This is it's in many forms. In a lot of ways, resources is a challenge for a lot of media houses. And also a lot of journalists are also not involved in accountability related issues. And I think that when it comes to election reporting, the media would, to make an adequate impact, it will need to depart from its traditional way of reporting. I mean reporting as we know it in the Gambia. Yeah. It has to go from going to Kande and ask him what he think of Dabo, and going to Dabo and ask him what he think of Khalifa, and going to Barrow and ask him what he think of PPP or NPP or the kind of merger, all the issues we hear about every day and everyday reporting. So the question would be, what should the media do in providing the people the information required for them to make adequate choices? Because for people to make good choices at the polls, it's important that they have all the information that it's necessary. I mean, in terms of what the current governance architecture is, what is the president doing, what are policies, what policies are in place, what promises have made and how much of those promises were kept. But also focus on the opposition. What kind of policies do they have? Does their policies answer the questions that the Gambian people are asking? What is their views on education? What is their position on even gay rights? What's their position on all the other fundamental human rights related issues? And if you ask me, the media hasn't been doing well in this area. So far, it's the same thing. We of course, report on politics, but we report mostly on what individuals think of each other or what individuals think of each political party, but not really in depth, not about issues, not about corruption, not about public finance issues and things like that. So probably the media would need to have a lot of improvement and provide adequate resources to their news desk to do a more of public interest reporting on this kind of matters. I think that's the state of affairs right now. It's not pretty.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dabo. Fajan Senghor, from your observation, traveling, staying most of the time in the Gambia as Richard, what's your observation? Are the media really involved? Are they really prepared in or doing a good job so far?
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to all the organizers for inviting me to share my thoughts and really for keeping this important discussion on the diaspora vote and all the aspects relating to electioning really to the limelight. I think it's very important as Gambians from across the world, including in the Gambia, the people are having this important conversation. I will start maybe by reiterating maybe one or two things before I get to that point, just to say that it's difficult to have a democratic election without a media that is free. Starting from there, one can say the media is relatively free in the Gambia. Freedom in the sense that we have less repression. They can go about their businesses. But I believe that there are few challenges that we need to highlight. Mustafa mentioned some of them already. I will just reiterate. But the legal framework in itself has not changed significantly. We've all known that major reform didn't take place as we all expected. And why it is important at this stage, because we are in a transition. And as we all know, transitional democracies need more support, more processes, and more public engagement than robust democracy that are used really to electioning, that are used to public debate, that are used to openness. And we know that in most instances, our public institutions are quite challenged, and the issues around voters registration, voters education, and so many other things revolving around elections are not settled in a country that like Gambia, and in most countries that have had difficult past and that are moving towards democratic governance. So I think that issue is yet to be addressed properly, like the issue of capacity of the institutions that are revolving around elections, and to ensure that all the aspects are taken into account. And the media itself, of course, we've said media is relatively free. We are breathing. We know that the journalists used to be repressed all over. During election, they used to have a small window which was relatively used very cautiously. Now you see like a myriad of media houses, from broadcast, print, digital. But what we are noticing more and more, specialized media. We don't have a lot of specialized media, which in itself is a problem, because election is a specialized matter. Because you need to understand the electoral laws, the electoral processes. And Mustafa mentioned something very fundamental in this day and age. You need, as journalists, to be able to question the programs of the different political parties. By doing so, also you need to have the baggage, the knowledge about programs, and interrogate some of those programs and talk to the different stakeholders, those who are putting themselves to be elected. I think we need also to interrogate them and do the necessary also investigation about who they are, put their profile. I think those are things that we expect from the media. We have, for example, 20 parties, I think, but we have not seen really important research done on those political parties, on those individuals who would like to come forward and take the leadership of the country in the future. And I think these are the things also that are very important for during election that is expected. Another point that I want to raise is about also access. In terms of to the private, but also in terms of to the public media. I'll start with the private media. As you can see, the private media has certain obligation, what we call in the legal term, like to be fair to all actors. But the public media has the right to ensure that there's equity, there's equality. And
yes.
How do you?
Sister Fatu, if I can stop you right there, because I think part of our follow-on questions is going to be access as well. And at that point, I would want you to deliberate on that a bit more. Thanks ever so much. Thank you for your opinion.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Suleiman, the same question goes to Babu Abdullah Job. He's in the diaspora. And we'll ask also the question in terms of preparedness. For those in the diaspora with a platform, how prepared are they to ask the relevant questions as journalists providing information to the electorate?
Thank you.
Babu, over to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yes, we can.
All right. Hey, I'm glad to be here, Babu Abdullah of Diasporium. Always a pleasure to be amongst very knowledgeable people in the media. So the question, are we ready? In my opinion, and humblest opinion, we are not. We've never been ready. In any country and in a democracy where the absence of freedom of information is, that society is not ready. The reason for that is the actual freedom of information vehicle that provides the truth through lawsuits, litigations, arbitrations, to where the media has access to the truth, the unbiased truth as it happened. Who initiated the issue at hand, the policy at hand, the intricacies that affect the people, what were the back channel communications, what happened behind the scenes, under the table, how government uses its resources to evade responsibility, and then still has control of the facts as to what it wants to tell people and what it doesn't want to tell people. So pretty much we are left being speculative, majority of us, majority of the institutions that we build without access to the truth and the real truth. And sometimes we can only have access to that truth because the government is not willing to give it up, but we have to fight it. We have to fight to get it through the courts, through our existing laws, if they're possible, through lawsuits. And I haven't seen things like that happening. So as we're going into 2021, I believe it will be more speculative than the real truth of what is happening behind the scenes.
Thank you, Babu. We'll take the same question to Mr. Samsar. Mr. Sar, are you with us? And can you hear us? Mr. Sar, you're muted.
I think we can move on to Demba Balde whilst we try and reach Mr. Sar.
Okay.
Demba?
Yes, you guys can hear me?
Yes, we can, Demba.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, Ben. Thank you, Day, and all of you for organizing. Thank you, Maimuna and Liz, for organizing this one of these meetings again. For doing this for a long time now. I mean, obviously today's topic is very, very critical. We ask all the questions, right? As journalists and as media, usually we're the one that brings in the stories, and we don't want to be the stories. But I think it is very important for us to ask the relevant questions, which is what you just asked: are we ready? I would concur with Babu. I'm not sure we are ready. What I would have preferred, and this may be in the works, I would have preferred to see the Media Commission in the Gambia and the Gambia Press Union really to organize election training for our young journalists. Most of our journalists on the ground are very, very young. They have never been formally trained in a media institution. I would have preferred to see the GPU and the Media Commission to really organize, a training for the young journalists. And it may have happened, I don't know, maybe I missed it, I don't know. But we should have series of these trainings. We can even invite international trainers to come in and train people as to how to cover the media. The transparency is absolutely critical. One of the reasons why the 2016 elections were won was because of on-the-spot counting. Now, on-the-spot counting is absolutely critical, and the media need to be there to hear these stories, to see what is happening. It is registration time. We haven't seen a lot of reporting from the media, as to what is happening, right? I mean, it could be attributed to a lot of things. It could be attributed to resources, but I think training had a lot to do with it. If you look at advanced democracies, let's say in the US or in the UK and other places, and even in our sister country, Senegal, the media takes the center stage, especially when it comes to elections. I mean, I would have also expected by now the Media Commission and the GPU would also prepare something like a guideline or a checklist of where the media need to cover. And we should even be organizing, presidential debates or candidates debates, not only presidential. See, the media here in the US, for example, we call it the Media Commission. They organize presidential debates and they invite candidates. Which big politicians will never organize these things for us. This is our role to do. And if we need to put together resources, we need to be able to put together resources. I don't think we're ready, but I think, as Mrs. James said, Fatu said, we're freer. The media is freer right now, in terms of, reporting, in terms of where our people can go. The public need to be sensitized of the role of the media. Why is a journalist at a polling station? Why is a journalist at the registration? Say they can be given unfettered access to these things. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you.
And then we'll continue. Thank you, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Demba. I would, Flex, if you are in a better place now, let us know, because I want to put this question to you, especially coming on the side of social media. Are we taking the opportunities provided in this democracy, as at least we have that freedom to move around, to access the information if it's not even readily available? What's your take on that, Flex?
Yes, thank you very much for that question.
Recording stopped.
Can you can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. With regards to access to information, this was actually just an issue which I raised today. I was talking to the IEC vice chairperson, where I was asking him with regards to the information, because us as civil society, we are currently looking at, the areas which have low numbers of registered voters. But the IEC, in their first press release of the statistics, you can see the data was aggregated or segregated to highlight the different administrative areas. So, but then the second issue of statistics, which they issued on Wednesday, only gave totals per week and per gender, not breaking it down for administrative areas. And obviously, I engaged them, I questioned them, why is that so? We as civil society and media need to be able to identify the areas which have low registered voters. So that's an access to information specifically on elections issue. We haven't done rapport. I even had this interview today with the vice chairperson, just today, where I'm coming from. Thanks to GPU's event, which they organized, I managed to get that opportunity. So there's that opportunity for us to rapport and engage and try to pressure them to give us the information. But as you see, it is not always, it's not like it's readily available. You have to continue process of engagement. But just to highlight, because of the issue is about the election cycle. And I think it's very important when we're talking about the election cycle, we consider before even the election.
Recording in progress.
The reason why I say that before even the elections, we know we are currently looking at reforms. Everything is about reforms. Electoral reforms is also taking place as we are still moving. Whether the game will change before the next election is a question I even asked a political flag bearer yesterday. They told me that they don't think that the rules of the game will change. These are all things which we as journalists should be following, whether we are really prepared.
Yeah.
Like I think I will co-sign to Babu Ablai Job's point, which is the fact that we have never been prepared. We never really highlight, for example, this was the NDP. This is what the government agenda was, and they've only achieved so much. We don't go and say they have digitized the Gambian economy or digitized, which is one of the NDP objectives. So I'm also looking at the financial aspect. I know a lot of you see me writing about a lot about that. I've got some assessment of looking how much has been spent during the current administration. So I don't think we have ever been ready. And I also co-sign with what Malagan reporter has said, Mustafa Dabo, yeah, which is looking at the issues. We hardly ever look at the issues. Many of us journalists would do the sensationalist publications, which gets them more views and more reach. So I think that certainly needs to be improved, the capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Flex. Thank you. We'll come back to you on that. Mr. Sanyang, are you ready now? Mr. Alufama Sanyang? Or Mr. Samsar Foria? Okay, we'll have to move back to Mr. Dabo. Mr. K. Dabo, let's move on to the involvement in the registration. In fact, we generally agree that we are not ready for many reasons been advanced. But as we are presently dealing with the registration, how much involvement does the media have, or how effective is their involvement?
Well, so I think generally, let's just say, even though we have a lot of issues regarding our state of preparedness, regarding how much involved we are, regarding access to resources, regarding the numbers of people in the newsrooms, man capacity, human resources. There's been some improvements even in the reporting as well over the years. With regards to the involvement in voter registration, I would say that a lot of issues that are being raised as concerns, they've adequately not being looked into by the media. For example, there were a number of allegations about registrations of people who may or may not hold valid national ID cards or valid national documents or attestation fraud and other issues. Without the media being biased in the favor of either sides of the argument, but it really behoves on the media to make sure that such issues, when they are raised, are clear. False, if it's false, that needs to be cleared. if it is true, that needs to be clear. And that's where sort of investigative journalism comes in. I think that that has been lacking. I mean, as far as we are concerned, we were pretty preoccupied with COVID funds. We have done actually no story on voter registration issues. And even though it's highlighted in other media, but it has so far been a question of an opinion of individuals. Say, for example, someone from political party X said there is a attestation fraud, and someone from party Z says no, there is no attestation fraud. So it's someone's word against another.
Yeah,
that is problematic, because what the whole point of the media is to provide an evidence-based reporting where issues of such concern are totally put to rest. Mm-hmm. So it's unlike where you go to NPP and they said no attestation fraud, you go to UDP and they said attestation fraud, and then you go to PDI. That's fine. I mean, if you want to just sound the opinion of political parties, and all political parties need to be heard. Of course, that's the purpose why the media exists, and every citizen needs to be heard too. But then the media should also go as far as fact-checking what is in the public space, and then that aspect is lacking. Mm-hmm. But on a general note, I think that there has been considerable improvement in the way generally how the media looks at things in this country, and hopefully we will get there. But for now, probably we will need a little more improvement on sort of more investigative journalism in this area. Attestation issues, registration issues, they are a major problem, yes.
Thanks ever so much, Mustafa. More investigative journalism needed in this area, as you've said. We'll pose the same question to Mohamed Espa, the Vice Chair of the Gambia Press Union, if he's with us. Mr. Mohamed Ba, are you with us? If Mr. Mohamed Ba is not with us, Aliou Famara Sanya of the Gambia Press Union. Mr. Sanya, can you hear us? Mr. Sanya? Mr. Sar? We seem to be struggling with our participants from the Gambia. So I'll pose this question back to Babu Abdullah Job. Babu Abdullah Job from the Diaspora and Diasporium news outlet. Babu, how have you guys been following the registration process and disseminating the information to your listeners? Diasporium, can you hear me? We seem to be struggling with Diasporium. I'll pose this question to Fatou Jan Senghor. Fatou, what sort of information or teachings can you bring into the fore with regards to experiences from the continent in the coverage of their registration process and their elections? How have you learned from them what their media does and how it disseminates information to ensure that the citizenry are kept abreast with what is happening? Over to you, Fatou Jan.
Thank you, Sose. I think around this time, the most important thing is access. As we all know, information is power. If you have access to information and the right information, you can make decisions, you can make your choice, and you can also highlight any challenges that may be on your way, especially relating to the process. In many countries, including Senegal, South Africa, different other African countries, during the election, the media regulator, which is the official institution that is in charge of regulating the media, is in charge of ensuring that access is fair. In some other countries, sometimes there are nuances where some of the role is delegated to the IEC. For example, in the South Africa, but you see, like, it's a huge machinery. We have more than 800 staff, big machinery, well articulated program, but also anchored on very clear laws. And in Senegal here is the broadcast regulator that is in charge of all communication from, posters, from all the billboards to the political advertisement, access to the public media, including access to private media. All those things are managed by a body that is mandated to ascertain that access is fair and equitable. Currently in the Gambia, I think we are working with a very hybrid situation. We have the IEC on one part with certain guidelines on how media should be covering elections. We have the self-regulatory bodies and the body which is set up by the professionals. And we have the PURA, but we all know that PURA has not developed a capacity or expertise in relation to media coverage of election. So I think from that angle, we may have some issues if things are not tightened properly. Why I'm saying that is that you have like a myriad of media houses today. They are set up, but we don't have a specific law, modern law that is guiding their operation, that is helping them to grow, that is helping also them in relation to certain areas of regulation. And as we speak today, all that role is left to PURA, but PURA is more regulating the telecom sector, with that we all know, because that's where they've been more active during oppression, because during the Jammeh's time, the media was really relegated to second. It was repression, but there was no effort to help regulate the media. So they were just brutalized. There were no effort to help regulate the media, ensure that they grow properly. So we are in this situation. Maybe where I want to close is that despite all the challenges, I think we can work with what we have. What we have in the sense that we have the principle, we know how these things should be working, and the different guidelines from the Gambia Press Union, from all these institutions, including Article 19 and different other institutions, IFJ, there are rules on how to govern, how to cover election. And I think if journalists continue to use those to get inspired by those rules, I think they can do a good job. They've been trying despite the challenges of experience for certain, lack of expertise in terms of election. And very few, as the other colleagues mentioned already, very few are really into how to call it, into investigation. So we realize that there's a lot to be done. But as we go along, we realize that there are rules. For example, for the Gambia radio and television, where we need to put a focus is the public service broadcaster. It's not yet transformed the way we would like it to be transformed, but Gambia Radio Television has like a guideline on an editorial policy, which should guide it to ensure that they give when the access to all political parties. And these are things that will be monitored very closely. We also need the political parties and all the actors also to be proactive, come forward, use the broadcaster, make their requests in time, and ensure that they use their public service broadcaster. And I think that's how also we can get the situation more dynamic. There are a few other issues around restriction, and also what should we avoid. I think we can talk about it in the latter part. But I think in terms of access, there are myriads of media houses, yet they are growing, still not sophisticated as we have in the sub-region due to our past. But I believe that we can help and push all together to strengthen. You can see from 2000 to now how the Senegalese media had worked so hard to ensure access for the public, but also to ensure transparency. Now we have the counting on the spot since last election, and that is where we would like to push and encourage the media houses and journalist association to work and prepare a plan so that that avenue is used properly to ensure that we have a fair and transparent election. The last point is about the registration. Election is not about just the day, it's about before, all the things that happen. I think this is also a time where journalists must be vigilant. They must scrutinize the registration process. They must scrutinize the voters register and ensure that when we get at the revising stage, they are also alerted. And we believe that the political parties will do the same. But we believe the journalists have a role to play in ensuring that they pursue the process from day one and not wait just for election day to start reporting. So I'll pose that.
Thanks ever so much, Fatu. Journalists must be vigilant. Journalists must be present. Journalists must be availed the capacity and the expertise. Thanks ever so much. Mr. Ba, Mohammed Ba, I believe Mr. Mohammed Ba has joined us. Welcome to the program, Mr. Ba.
All right, thank you. Thank you for joining the program. Thank you so much.
Yes. Mr. Ba, can you just give a brief introduction of yourself so that for the benefit of our listeners and our panelists as well?
Yes, I am Mohammed Ba, fondly called MS. I am the Vice President of the Gambia Press Union.
Thanks ever so much, Mr. Ba, for honoring the invite and to be part of this panel. Mr. Ba, we've asked the question before you arrived. We'll ask it now to you as well, as you represent the Gambia Press Union, a body that is responsible for disseminating information. And we also are banking on you guys to give us an unfettered, unbiased view of what is happening. So, Mr. Ba, we ask the question, now that elections are upon us, how prepared are the journalists considering the role of media in providing information to the electorate? Over to you, Mr. Ba.
All right. Thank you so much, Madam. Yes. We've seen, currently the Gambia is undergoing a general registration process. I'm even in Basel right now on the ground on behalf of the Civil Society Coalition, doing certain engagements stuff, which GPU is part of. Basically, the preparedness when it comes to journalists, I can say it's not like, I can say it's like probably, let's say, 50% of preparation. That is why we need more training with regards to election reporting, with regards to ensuring that there is ethical and unbiased reporting, because we've seen that some of these journalists, they are just probably doing their work, but it's not following the ethical values or ethical code of conduct. But most of our journalists as well are really doing a good job to ensure that they follow the process, especially the registration process, because the registration process is one of the most important process when it comes to elections. It either decides the credibility of elections. We've seen a lot of things that are happening, and then the media is following it. Like, for instance, the attestation, the issue of alcalos giving a minors attestation, which is unlawful, that people who are underage. We've seen also people try to politicize, giving out the document, and also the issue of, in Banjul currently, the mayor giving the attestation, which is somehow controversial, and the media is also raising alarm. So people are doing a lot of things with regards to, and even the sensitization. But we've seen the other side of the media trying to give a platform for politicians to incite violence, because if you give platforms to politicians as a media outlet, then a journalist writing what politicians are saying, which could be detrimental, like, for instance, attacking a specific tribe, a specific group, and then trying to amplify those voices, I think it could be detrimental. So I think the media journalists. Some of these journalists need to be trained and then to be told at least what to some of these things, to be very careful on some of these things that could be very dangerous to society, that could be very detrimental. So, definitely it's a problem, it's definitely a problem. So, but GPU is trying to engage journalists. I think we did some engagement last week. We've engaged some journalists. We even engaged political parties on, on political participation and ensuring that there is peaceful, peaceful participation, and also trying to encourage journalists to follow the ethical principles and the GPU code of conduct, which is the Cherno Jalo, the new code of conduct, which is named the veteran journalist. So yeah, basically these are things that GPU is trying to do, and to see a lot of opportunities that we can bank on to help journalists to better understand election reporting. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks ever so much, Mr. Ba. As you've said, you're trying to engage journalists and political parties, getting journalists to adhere to the GPU code of conduct, ensuring that there is training. But the general consensus is a lot needs to be done. I'll move over to Babu Abdullah Job and pose this question to him. Babu Job, with regards to the registration process, what is your medium doing to ensure that your listeners, Gambians abroad and in the Gambia, are sensitized with regards to the registration process? Over to you, Babu Job.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can
yes,
hear you.
we can. Thank you.
Oh, great. I do apologize. I'm streaming and contributing at the same time. So I lost connection on my desktop and using my phone now. I apologize I could hear your question, but by the time I could answer, I lost the connection. I would have loved to delve into the previous question that you asked, but perhaps I'll take on that some other time. Right now, Diasporium, for example, I am not a journalist. Okay, I'm an activist. I just happen to own a media network. I'm opinionated, highly opinionated, because I see my citizenship first and my right to participatory democracy before even informing other people of my thoughts or my ideas or my observations. And one of the problems I see in Gambia is we have a situation in the media where we cannot separate our personalities and the institutions that we manage, or our views from the institutions that we manage. Majority of us are already political. We have political opinions already. We are driven by our own views of what we think Gambia is about, where we need to go, and what the opportunities are in developing our country. So one of the things that I've realized is that, let's say, a media like Diasporium, right? Yes, Diasporium is biased, is very biased. Why is it biased? It is biased because it has a view, and a view is, it is not biased to benefit political parties. It is not biased to benefit government. It is biased to push an agenda and takes a role of civic education that has been absent in our country since, I would say, independence. We have the constitution that says that we should invest in civic education. Right now, if I ask, what is the budget in civic education? I bet nobody knows the answer. I bet civic education, the way it should be inside of our institutions of education and learning, is not to the magnitude it's supposed to. So the media is taking a role of not only being a critic, but it should be an unbiased critic, but it's almost impossible to be unbiased. So you would have to be biased. Why? Because we are in the age of being biased in the sense that we're driven by social media right now. The mainstream media, the way it has been thought of, has always benefited politicians. It has always benefited. For example, you will be told and educated that, hey,
go report the unbiased facts, but you don't have access to those facts. That's the truth. You don't have it. The facts that you think you have are given to somebody who's already biased in a view, in an opinion. For example, if you source your news and your facts from the government, I can guarantee you it's coming from a faction of the government who works for the government, who's already interest-driven to protect the institution of government, the image of government, right? So how do you decide, right, what is biased and what is not biased? When you're in the media, you don't work for the government, you don't serve a government institution, but then you want to inform the people of what the actions of government are. But then where you source your news from, right, the person giving you that news or the institution giving you that news is already biased.
Okay.
Right?
But in terms of
in terms of that, what Diasporium is doing, what Diasporium does, I would say what I do, because Diasporium is an institution, what I do on my Audacity shelf is that I spend a lot of time studying the temperature of the country, studying the temperature of social media to see who's shaping opinion, why are they shaping opinion, what drives them to shape that opinion. And then if there's a counter effect on that, and I believe that that's something that people need to be aware of, then I come to my show and do it. As far as resources, Diasporium doesn't have the resources, right, to really participate the way GRTS would have. Diasporium, it's not your average or your normal news media. We're highly opinionated. We're partisan. We're partisan in the sense that, for example, I'll give an example. I live in the diaspora, right? And I believe I have the right to vote, which is guaranteed by my constitution. And then, after 5 years of the IEC not doing what it's supposed to do, I'm expected to sit tight, keep quiet, and not have an opinion. Whatever opinion I would have, it would be considered as biased. Why? Because I am in the diaspora. A couple of weeks ago, I went back in to revisit some of my thoughts as to our voter registration system. And then what you guys were doing for the past 4 weeks was brilliant. Having these radios come online, educate the people, fight for the diaspora and its right to vote. Now, I'll just share this with you. In Gambia, as to our constitution right now, in fact, when the IEC says that the diaspora cannot vote because it has to be present in Gambia, members of the diaspora, well, the IEC cannot locate one single voter in Gambia. Why? Look at our voter card. The registration process in our voter card. It just says place of birth. Does it give you an address where you live? It doesn't give you an address, a physical address of where you live. The standards that Gambians can be held accountable to vote inside of Gambia is not the same standards the diaspora is being held at. In the diaspora, at least in the United States or in Europe or anywhere else, you can actually trace a voter to their physical address. In Gambia, you can't. You can't trace a voter to their physical address. What does that mean? So if Babu on Diasporium shares that view, I'm already biased in an opinion that will favor the diaspora, but then too at the detriment of people on the ground, because nobody on the ground would like to feel that you're voting unconstitutionally. Why? Because the IEC cannot trace you to a particular address. The IEC is not even sure that you live in that address. But that's not the fault of the IEC, though.
Babu, if I can just stop you, Babu.
Ministry of Interior.
Yeah, Babu, if I can just stop you there. You've given us your thought process when you come to your radio and what you try to do in trying to sensitize your listeners about their right to vote, and you telling us that when you come, you are sensitizing your listeners from a biased perspective. We appreciate that. We appreciate the honesty as well. If you allow me to just move on, just been told that we've just gone past the hour, and I just want to bring in Mr. Sanyang from Gambia before we lose his connection. So if I can just move on to Mr. Sanyang, we'll come back to you, because the reason why we have got a cross section of different medium is that we live in a world that is evolving. We live in a world that does not just rely on print and media houses. We have social media with its benefits, that and the fact that it can reach wide audiences. You guys on social media also have a role to play, and like you said, you come with your own biased view to your listeners, trying to educate them based on that biased view. I think that's something we need to ponder on as well, because that is what the world is about at the moment. So we'll bring in Mr. Sanya as well from the GPU to tell us what the GPU is doing with regards to the registration process, and if his membership are prepared as well. Mr. Sanyang, over to you. Mr. Sanyang, can you hear us? Mr. Sanyang, we seem to be having problems with Mr. Sanyang. Mr. Sanyang, can you hear us?
Please, we have Mr. Jawo just join us too.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Jawo. Mr. Jawo, can you introduce yourself, please, for the benefit of our listeners and the panelists?
Yeah, mute, Mr. Jawo. You have to unmute yourself, Mr. Jao.
Okay. Sorry, I was muted. I wish to apologize first for coming late, because I was, I was let down by technology, because I thought I would just open the Zoom and then just log in, and then it started telling me you have to load. It was taking this long to download. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, I am Demba Jao, former information minister, former president of the Gambia Press Union, and etc. Thank you very much for inviting me to join in this panel. Right.
Thanks ever so much, Mr. Jawo, for joining us. We are honored to have you as well as a veteran journalist, and as a veteran journalist, we are honored to have you on the program with us today, and as a former minister as well. We shall be asking you questions on your capacity as a journalist and on your capacity as well in the reforms that you've tried to initiate whilst in government. But first of all, Mr. Jawo, we've been asking questions about the preparedness of journalists in reporting in this upcoming elections, and also to ask what journalists are doing with regards to the reporting during this registration process. Over to you, Mr. Jawo. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have absolutely no doubt that the Gambian journalists are quite prepared for the elections, because we've been covering elections for a long time now, so we are definitely not strangers to election coverage. And with regards to the, registration of voters, well, of course, this is quite a strange situation, because we've never experienced this kind of a situation when, everybody seems to be blaming everybody else about everything else. So that's an unfortunate situation. But, eventually, it's a new dispensation that we are in this country, because, as they say, it's a new Gambia. So everything is new, and everything is different from what it used to be. But I have absolutely no doubt that, we'll eventually overcome it, and things will work out normally. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Jawo, for your enthusiasm and the belief that you have in the preparedness of our journalists as well. Unfortunately, that has not been the view that has been expressed this afternoon on this forum. But we continue to ask the questions to our journalists, and hoping that each and every one of them gives us their view. With regards to the challenges that are being faced, that journalists are facing, in regards to access to all the relevant stakeholders and to all the relevant stakeholders, are the journalists given access, or are they victims of perceived or actual bias?
And we'll also go around the virtual table again to ask the questions, starting with Mr. Fadabo. If you would want to answer this question, please. Have the journalists been given access, and are they perceived, are some of them perceived to be biased, or are they actually biased? Mr.
Let's begin with the issue of access. I think generally that the issue of lack of access to information in this country is exaggerated. I think there is incredible level of information out there. The problem we have been facing over the years, I will come to being biased later. Maybe you can remind me if I forget. The problem that we've faced in this country over time is that we haven't encouraged the culture of investigative journalism, which by all standards, it's easier. And of course, it's a little more expensive because it means that you're going to spend a little more time on one story. But then, for example, every information currently you need, whether it's finance, whether it's corruption-related matters, whether it's public procurement, whether it's audit books, everything is available. The only thing that is lacking is people who are ready to look and people who know where to look. That's the problem. Now, for example, the Gambia government accounts are audited yearly. Of course, sometimes the National Audit Office is dealing with a huge backlog. I hope I'm not digressing from the main.
You're not. No, you're not.
No, you're not.
Exactly. So, for example, if you look at audits, every year, Gambia government books are audited. The National Audit Office audits all books. Of course, we are dealing with a backlog, but we have at least 2016, 2017, and 2018 already and submitted to the National Assembly. What this have is a treasure trove of data available for journalists to look into in area of accountability. Where has our money been spent? How has it been spent? Who steal what? Of course, auditors don't exhaust all things, but at least they give you a clue, an idea, some kind of a lead to begin an investigation. That's one thing. Second, you have special audits that are done, tons of special audits annually that are done. Not long ago, I've seen a lot of people complain about there is a bit of a distraction coming from Mr. Sanya. Not long ago, I saw some people complain about childbirth dying as a result of birth.
Mustafa, can you please
actually what didn't come?
Mustafa, can you please stop? Mr. Sanyang, you coming through? Can you mute, please? Mr. Sanyang, can you mute, please?
It's mute now.
Okay, Mr. Dabo, can you carry on, please?
Okay, so for example, if you had looked at that, the complaints at that time, what was lacking was an official data, but we didn't know. Little must people know, and in fact, it's not reported in the Gambian media that actually the National Audit Office has done a thorough study on all the women who have died in a, I don't know, they call it obstetric something care. In the past, we can check that in their website later. Yeah, but they have done an adequate study looking at all the capacity at the local hospitals and the clinics and explore and even offer advices on what ought to be done. And of course, this audit would later come to be one of the best performance audits in Africa. In fact, 2020 best performance audit in Africa. So other than this, there are several special audits. Special audit was done on GMPC. Special audit was done on NAVEC. In fact, last year, special audit is done on all parastatals last year. So if you look at it, there's tons of, when it comes to public sector corruption, tons of information available. If you look at the data before the National Public Enterprise Committee alone, it's tons of information. Journalists, we can hover over it for a year. We cannot exhaust it. Right now, the COVID expenditure is audited. At least 2 bulky reports are ready, and they are before several ministries. That information is available for us to look into. Even the Malagasy so-called KIO that we had imported, that we did story about, was also subject of an audit. So information is there in tons. But the problem that we have been facing is complaining.
Do you want to get into the point of the bias? Is it self-censored due to, do we find self-censored due to bias affiliating to political interests? Or is it bias because of the financial constraints within the economy? That some people are paying for advertisements or sustaining the business of journalism. What are
I think the problem, in fact, is that there is really no really significant bias against any political establishment in the Gambia, as far as I am concerned. Because if we are going to suggest that there is bias, we are going to also agree that there is sufficient what in the US they will call opposition research in the Gambia. Say, for example, one political party doing enough investigation on damaging information on opponents and publishing them using the media and things like that. But the problem in our situation is that neither the good nor the bad is happening. So all that the media does is that you go to Dabo and you talk to Dabo, and Dabo tells you this, and you go to Kande tells you this, and you go to Halifa tells you that, and you go to, so that in itself it appears on the surface as a neutral coverage to me. I mean, personally, if you are asking about my own loyalty, whether I've exhibited biases in my work in the past, well, there had been complaints. I mean, there have been complaints, but they hadn't been significant. I haven't considered them to have come halfway the threshold of facts as far as I am concerned, because if you look at my stories, they indiscriminate. They are about almost every topic. I had done stories about passports, people who belong to various political parties. So I wouldn't know how that would be connected to politics. But generally, I think that in the media, we're not dealing with a biased media. We are dealing with a media that lacks capacity. And I think that is where improvement will come in. And also the attrition rate. For example, you have Uncle Dia here. I mean, he's not a reporter now. Probably we will need some more old guards coming back to pick up the pen and the book and then lead the young journalists to State House and ask the tough questions. Maybe we will need that. But then also to have that, you will need enough resources for the media houses to be able to sustain those old people to come back into the media. You see, that's also a problem. Look at the attrition rate in the media. There are a lot of brilliant old people, brilliant average people who are older than, like, they call me in the Gambia a senior journalist. I started journalism in 2015 at Today newspaper. 2015 to now, it's barely 5 years. But then where are the Sirif Bojang juniors? Where are Sirif Bojangs? Where is Demba Jaw? I mean, the oldest we have right now is Uncle Sam. Okay. Uncle Sam, Swaibus and others, they've disappeared. I mean, so you have very young people in the media, very young people who are graduating from senior school. We are the eldest, people like me, Flex Dan, MS Bar, and the likes. So probably we would also have to deal with that. And we will also need to do a lot more coaching in the Gambian media. I know there are a lot of Facebook kind of journalism and things like that, but the old guys still have a lot of potency that the young ones need in terms of direction and things like that. So there are a lot more issues combining together.
Thank you, Mr. Dabo. I think we get you there, and very important you raise the issue with capacity. And another issue is that we have generations of good media practitioners who are active, but probably not active in the sense that the difference can be made. And we'll push on to try and get Mr. Aliu Sanyang to see if he can come in and contribute. Mr. Sanyang, can you hear us now? You are mute. Yeah.
Well, if you have unmute me, then I can participate. Are you hearing me?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sanyang. We can hear you now. If you want to introduce yourself first, then we can put some of the questions we have already asked.
Yes, I want to describe myself as a veteran journalist, what we call here in Gambia a veteran journalist, meaning that, well, I have been in this profession for maybe since 1979. You want to do the maths? From 79 up to 2019, when I last worked at APA, this agency in Dakar. Then I came back to Gambia, and then since then I have been with the TRRC. But if you do the maths, maybe then you can see for how long I have been in journalism. You know?
Probably 45 years.
Sorry?
Probably 45 years and over.
Well, okay, that's it. That shows you. And coming back to what Mustafa has just said, maybe I also belong to this category of journalists who have been quite active, but then now we are wasting, so to speak. Okay? Yes. If you want to look at it this way, since 79, I have been a reporter. And then to come back to our own topic here, which is about journalists, the election cycle. I was reporting in 1996, the first elections, on the Yaya Jammeh, okay? And then, I could recall that I went out with my team and led my team, and then we went out and we reported, covered the whole thing, and then came back and published. Then I was working, of course, for the Government Information Services. And then, I think the newspaper then was called either Gambian Weekly or Gambia Daily. Okay. But then let me go back now to your earlier question about capacity. Yes. When you ask whether we are prepared. Yes. If you want to ask me, I will say maybe that question should be put to the proprietors of media houses like Mustafa, for example, of Malawi. You want to ask him whether he is prepared. I'm sure he will say yes, he is prepared, in the sense that he's getting ready to go out and cover the presidential elections in December 4th. Okay, you want to put the same question to the heads of media houses, like the editors or the proprietors. They will say yes. Why not? Okay. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, they are prepared, and they will be prepared when the time comes. Because it's a process, and then when we get closer to the process, then they will organize themselves and mobilize resources and so on and so forth. Resources in terms of their quotas and editors and so on and so forth, and then get them ready to go out and cover the election on the 4th, and so that they can, for the benefit of the Gambian public and living overseas. Okay? Yes. I want to add that, yes, they are prepared as far as I'm concerned, because, over the years, we have given training to these journalists to election, election reporting and coverage. I want to mention at this stage that, I was, for example, responsible for managing a project called by the ICFJ, way back in 2010 all the way to 2013-14, okay, which was designed to train journalists, to build the capacity of Gambian journalists. And then I could recall very clearly that, we conducted another project, ICFJ project in Gambia. We conducted 2 workshops on election reporting, okay. The first one was in 2011, September 2011, and then the second one was in January 2012, okay? And then, then we had trained as many as 40 journalists, reporters and editors alike, okay? In terms of election coverage and reporting. Okay, I'm just looking at some of the documents I have been using at that time when I was leading this project, okay? And then,
If you allow me to ask the follow-up. Preparedness or the training issued by these journalists, what is the impact for the ongoing registration? Do we have any impact of the Gambian journalists in this registration process? What's the impact?
Well, again, I would want to think that, the media houses which are going to cover that election and which should be going out to see how this registration process is going on, are doing so. If they are not doing so, then you wonder why. But they have been trained, as I said, through these training workshops we held over the years. They have been trained to be able to do all these things, okay? And then so that, they should really be out there. I have had comments that, this is not happening, that this process is going on, but then, there are no reports seen or heard about what some of the things that are going on. Of course, there have been complaints on social media about, what's going on in Banjul by the mayor giving attestations, okay? And then, about alcalos, like the Latikula complaints about the Latikula alcalo giving attestations to anybody, whether you are from Basi or whether you are from Latikula. And these are things that are filtered through the media, okay? Yes, so that, I think, yes, there have been mentions of, some of these things happening during this registration process, okay? Well, Mustafa made a point about, not hearing about, the registration of what may be a non-Ghanaians and so on and so forth, complaints about that. But then, that this should be investigated, but then I'm not sure that's going to be easy, okay? You see, there is a process here. After the registration process, there will be a revising court. I think it's called a revising court. People sitting in there in Banjul or in all these divisions, and then this of people registered will be pasted on the wall somewhere, and then people will be asked in every community to go and scrutinize that list. And then if you spot anybody, any name which you feel should not be there, then you take it up through a process. I think then you report to the court. And then, you challenge the matter to the court, okay? So that will come. So that, journalists, as I said, this is not something, anything new. There has been a process where, again, some of us are well-versed and experienced in this area. So that, like Mustafa just said, if we were given the chance maybe to coach the young ones and to advise, we'll be able to tell, the media houses, the editors right now, and so on and so forth, how to go about some of these things, okay? Yeah. But then the reality is that, yes, capacity is there. Whether in the media houses right now, which I feel is there, and whether, as a veteran journalists who are still in the country are able to give advice and support to some of these processes. Yes. But this is what I wanted to say at this stage about, the preparedness. I feel they have been sufficiently trained, and that, these people are still around. But if you just to wrap up, there's this chap called Beka Njai, who is, I understand, is presently the editor of the Point newspaper. This chap was by my project, to be precise, the election reporting and coverage. He was one of the participants. I have the list of participants right here, okay? Yes. I mean, there are a whole lot of project guys, like Lamin Jahati, for example, he is now the GPU program manager, the program officer. So that, in terms of the GPU, participation in getting journalists prepared, he has got the knowledge, the resources, the skills, and so on and so forth, obtained from the guidelines, obtained from our own budget, to be able to pass on to media houses and the journalists and so on and so forth, okay? Since the man that he's away, people like Sidi Dabo, he used to be with Standard newspaper, he's now away, but then you still have people like Eba Antumane.
Mr. Sanya, if I can just come in, we've heard from, it's echoing. Do you just want to mute whilst I'm speaking? Maybe it might be better. We've heard from one of the speakers, I think it was Mustafa, who talked about the attrition rate. And some of the names that you're calling at the moment as well, you were saying that have left. So the question that we pose is, given the fact that some of them have left, the people that you have trained have left, or the level of reporting is below par, what can you propose to do with regards to training of the current journalists, crop of journalists in the Gambia, to ensure that we have a free, complete, and unbiased reporting from the journalists? Over to you, Mr. Sanya. I think he's muted. Can you unmute Mr. Sanya, please?
Yes, I have unmuted the mic so that yes, I can come again. Okay, like I said, the resources, the guidelines, and so on and so forth, they are still available in the media houses. So many people are still there. And then, these same media houses, and then even some of these same individuals who we are trained by us can again, come back and make an effort and, get their institutions, media houses organized to go out and do a decent coverage of this forthcoming election, okay? So as far as I'm concerned, the resources, in terms of human resources, in terms of some documents lying somewhere which they can use as guidelines, to remind us of what has been spelled out again in terms of going about election coverage and reporting. I think these things are still available at the media houses. And then also, whether it's Observer, which is no longer, of course, around, but whether it's The Point, or whether it's even the Standard, as I mentioned earlier, and a whole lot of others, they still have this documents around. And even at the GPU, when we were running this project, we were doing it in collaboration with the GPU, so that the resources are still available in the GPU archives or wherever, so that if they were to launch, they want to launch a training workshop, a refresher course, for example, for journalists to be able to go out and do this work recently. Well, it should be quite easy. Okay, it should be quite easy. So, well, yes, in answer to your question, I will say that yes, why not? Let them see whether it's TPP, whether it's the media houses. If they feel that they need to refresh, or maybe if they feel that they want to conduct some training for journalists in this area, some of us are available. I mean, are quite willing, quite interested to be able to come and share with them what we have in terms of knowledge in our heads, in terms of papers we have kept somewhere which we can bring and then share with them. These things are available, so it's up to them. It's up to them really. But then the resources are out there, and then in terms of preparedness, well, I feel that closer to the event itself, people will have organized themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Sergeant. We'll get back to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Flex, if you're still available, Flex Dan. Flex Dan, if you're still available.
Suleiman, if Flex is not available, can we bring Mr. Jawa in, please, to talk to us with regards to the work that he did in office to ensure that they repeal the draconian media laws that are in our statute books? Mr. Jawa? And how he thinks some of these laws will impact on the journalists reporting during this election cycle. Mr. Jawa, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Indeed, I remember when I was in office, we tried all we could actually to repeal some of these bad laws, very media-friendly laws that have been in the books. Unfortunately, some of them are still there, and the process is on as far as I know. Because what we did was, I set up a committee and mandated that committee to actually go over the laws, the media laws in our books, isolate some of those ones that we actually either wanted to change, amend, or repeal altogether. The committee did very good work. They isolated most of the laws, and so the process was actually to work with the Ministry of Justice, who are actually responsible for the legal aspect as well, because they are the people who can draft laws, doing amendments and all things of that nature. So we did all that, and but as I said, the process was not complete while I was in office. But and I understand that the process is still on, and some bills have been sent to the National Assembly, and the bills are still there. In fact, one of those bills is the ATI, that is the Access to Information Law. That also I started while I was in office, and I know the process is well advanced in the National Assembly. Last week it was being debated, and probably before the end of this ordinary session of the National Assembly, it will be passed. That's the hope I have. And but certainly, a lot of work has been done in that area, but a lot of work still is left to be done in regards to the repeal or amendment of some of those bad laws. Unfortunately, that's the situation. And just to refer to what Mustafa said, I think he had some points. There is a lot of information out there that journalists actually can make use of. But some of us are maybe either too lazy or we lack the capacity to actually go out and get the information there. Like he said, every year there is this audit being done, and there is a lot of information that journalists can make use of. A good example that he gave was this Madagascar PO, which was sent, and according to his report, over $2 million was paid just to get that queue from Guinea-Bissau to the Gambia. I mean, I think that's a very serious issue, and I think journalists definitely need to, follow those kind of stories and get them, get authorities on their thoughts. Make sure that actually they get these things reported, so that the public would know exactly what is being done about these things. Unfortunately, the government seems to be silent about that issue, but I think the journalists should continue to hammer it on them so that they actually give us a very satisfactory answer as far as this issue is concerned.
Thanks ever so much, Mr. Dawo, for that concise answer. Demba Balde, do you think that the current state of the draconian laws in our statute books will hamper the level of...
Thank you very much. This is calling on Demba Balde, right?
Yes, Demba Balde.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Uncle D or Tom, good to see you, and Mr. Sanya as well. I think the media laws, that are in the books definitely would hamper, the work that, that journalists need to do on the ground. I mean, even though they may not be actively enforced, but they are always in the background, that there is a possibility that,
Yes, hello, how are you? Hello?
A lawsuit could be brought against you, or you're always conscious, if you're somebody like me, you're always conscious that you don't want to violate the law, right? So those media laws need to be out of our books. If not, they would continue to affect, the media coverage in the Gambia. Some journalists, I think, need to go out there and then don't defy some of these things, since the government has taken more of like an inactive, more of like a passive approach to not enforcing some of these things. So I think we should go ahead and do it. But at the end of the day, we need to be guaranteed that, if you go out and, do what you need to do, there wouldn't be any, legal consequences against you. Because the government, you remember the government shut down some media houses in the Gambia before. This government, not another government, surprisingly, this government, they shut down media houses, and they gave out an excuse that, it was because of security or because of concerns. Right. So, I think those things are, are affecting the people. Just the perception that the laws are there, would just, it goes to hamper it, it goes to hamper the work of the journalists. But I think, again, as John Lewis would say, the U.S. congressman, the late U.S. congressman would say, those things should be something like getting into good trouble. You can go out there and do your work and then, just do your reportings and do a lot of things. And, following up on what Mustafa has said earlier about veteran journalists, I think Uncle D and others, Mr. Siam also might be part of the media commission. At least I know Uncle D was part of the media commission. I think, GPU should be organizing some kind of a training, where this veteran journalist, Mr. Sanya and others, will be brought in to train these young journalists. Mustafa mentioned earlier, he started journalism in 2015. Flex Dan and Mohamed Ba and all these people are very, very, very young. They haven't even experienced, a lot of election cycles. So I think the GPU should be organizing a training, and these veteran journalists can be invited to come in and train these young journalists into media reporting. I mentioned earlier, things like debates. The media commission should be organizing debates, in candidates. With candidates and all that. I know, we're not talking about that right now, but I think that is something that is important. For me, the frustration is that everything seems to be so slow in the Gambia. Everything seems to be not moving at all. It's just, bills are stuck with the National Assembly, bills are stuck with the Ministry of Justice, and it's just, everything just seems to be not moving. And there's some really very serious things happening in the Gambia because, the social media has a lot of, influence on the work of journalists right now. And there's a lot of chatter about, tribalism, people being denied to register. And the media hasn't covered that extensively. And it's very dangerous if we leave those things to just keep hanging on social media. Nobody dismisses them or nobody reports, to confirm them, it becomes very, very dangerous. And there is a continuous chatter about, the tension of the elections and how they are going to be covered and all that. I mean, I also wanted to mention about the bias that was discussed earlier. I mean, I think what we call bias is like, for example, I'm reporting about the government and I'm being critical about the government. You call me a biased journalist or a biased reporter. I mean, really, that's not what bias is, because we as journalists have our opinions as well. And we're citizens as well. We're citizens first before we become journalists. So I mean, right now there's a lot of opinionated journalists out there. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are biased. You're actually talking about the facts or how you see things. Thank you very much.
Thanks ever so much, Demba. Journalists expressing their opinion, as you say, is not bias. Can we bring in Fatu Jansengor, please, and ask Fatu, with regards to the draconian laws that are in our statute books as well at the moment, do you think these can hamper effective reporting during this election cycle? And what lessons can be learned as well from the continent with regards to draconian laws during election periods, attempting to stifle proper reporting? Fatu, over to you.
Thank you, Sosie. Very quickly, of course, the legal framework matters quite a lot. If you have clear laws that will tell you how to exercise the right, I think it protects you in a sense that it gives you the framework, but also it protects you in case of violation. And I think that is why we are we regret and we are very saddened that the reforms couldn't happen, because I think this election could have been a very important test for the new laws. Another matter that we need also to look at, I don't know if the colleagues have mentioned it, is safety of journalists is very important. And sometimes when we talk about safety of journalists in relation to election, also we're looking generally towards the public or public institution or the incumbent. But I think sometimes our experience in many countries have shown that also violence and aggression against journalists also can come from different, including from opposition. So I think there is a need for a reminder to all political parties that journalists have the right to be critical, have the right to scrutinize, and they must be protected. And all political parties must commit to a free and fair election and to free reporting and stop harassing or either verbally or physically journalists. I think if the laws were reformed, I think we will be more comfortable. The other bit is also about how to call it, the independence of the institutions that are regulating. Well, I think I mentioned it earlier. I think that is also a vacuum that we need to find ways of addressing.
Thanks ever so much, Fatu. Can you please mute if you are not speaking? To those on the call, please mute your mics if you are not speaking. Sorry. Thanks ever so much, Fatu.
Liz, if you don't mind, we try and get Flex. He's just in box. He's available now. And he wanted to contribute on...
bring him in.
Yes, thank you very much. Our internet connection, it got the better of me. That's why I couldn't join, or I dropped out of the call. There were a few points which were noted about regulation of the media. And I think this is something that is probably under the radar, which speaks volumes to how it is being handled. Which is in the media, there is a huge discussion. Well, I don't know if it's huge, but should be self-regulation versus being regulated by another institution. So we have the Gambia Press Union, which has what you call the Media Council, the Gambia. They are supposed to enforce the code of conduct and ethics of the media, which MS spoke about. They have just updated it. This Media Council, the Gambia, has been responsible for doing that. They have been doing some work. And in fact, I published about the fact that they dealt with about 5 media institutions some time back. The information was all confidential. they don't release names. We have to name and shame so that they can know that they don't do it again. And there has to be consequences. And then when it comes to regulation, that's regarding what has happened in the past, but also for elections. That I believe MCG should be playing that role. They need capacity and they need support. It's all about the issue of should the media self-regulate itself, or should another institution, which could be susceptible to the executive that would probably be funding them, to regulate the media and possibly open doors to censor the media against the executive. These are all issues, complex issues, which we need to discuss, which the media needs to take charge in self-regulating. A survey has been done. We can afford, Afrobarometer, did a survey in which they were highlighting trust. The public politicians have the lowest trust. Then next, us, the media, fake news, social media. So with regards to self-regulation and how it can affect our politics and elections, I would like to highlight that fact. And I will let my other colleagues come in, but I have shared some points. I did prepare for this today because it's something which, if you follow me, it's there to me. And obviously, as an advocate for the diaspora to get the right to vote, I also have some ideas about that, which I could share later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, folks. Mr. Joe, Babu Baju. Babu, considering what you have heard from the people on the ground on constraints or areas saying that the capacity might be misplaced, or there's a generation of veteran journalists who are not seen as been used effectively in helping out, bring out the information or in the trade of journalism. What is your recommendation in that sense? Because especially with the senior journalists and social media, what is your take on those please? Babu,
can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Good.
Yeah, we can hear.
Hey, thanks for the great question. So this hardens me that when I go back into our history, pre-independence, we had a very vibrant youth, very vibrant and inspiring generation that wanted to inform the locals, that wanted to make sure that post-independence, it was part of the idea we can do for ourselves what others were doing for us, which was the colonial masters during the colonial era. Post-independence, we designed a system that consumes everybody, right? And over time, you contribute, you get older, you're kicked out. Then there is no passing the torch down to the younger generation, because by the time you do that, either you have found a way of being partisan or biased towards a particular view of where Gambia is going, and you decide to formulate your own following to a point where there are no enough resources to maintain what you're working on to get to the stage where you need to be as far as a veteran journalist, as far as building an institution. So to me, I believe the media through the GP year should reform itself. The first priority is to come up with a solution of how to be sustainable first. How to be sustainable. It's sad that you have people that have been in this business for 40, 50 years, right, or so, and then where they end up financially, right, would not allow them to be independent. Where they end up retirement-wise would not allow them, right, to to be able to survive in a way where they can still give opinion without being reprimanded, right? So, for example, let's say we don't have a government that is or that cares about ensuring the media has enough resources to retain, because I did hear you guys mention something about the attrition rate, which is so embarrassing, right? It is really embarrassing. The reason for that is, for example, take JRTS, okay? I don't see the people who really you guys are talking about are veterans, are people who have shaped Gambia media, the Gambia channels of information. I don't see them participating fully at the GRTS. Why? Because we've created this narrative that if we build an institution like GRTS, if you are to contribute there, you have to say what pleases the State House. You have to say something that pleases the ruling party of the day, right? So your chances of being a veteran, well knowledgeable, understanding the history of journalism and the media in Gambia is not wanted because you're not appeasing the power of the day. So what happens? You might not get employment. You might not be effective in as far as your knowledge, disseminating that knowledge to the younger generation or the locals at large, and you don't have a medium or platform to do it. So you're sidelined. So when you're sidelined, you become ineffective. Now, that means you're on your own, but being on your own, you have to feed your family, you have to take care of your bills. What are you left with? You're left with either a political party consuming you, using your talent, right? That should have been independent for anybody to make good use of, but now all of a sudden, you're partisan and biased in a particular view so you can survive. You're either doing that, looking forward to an appointment, a future appointment in government, but not an appointment in news media to where you're retained and paid a particular fee for your services. So in Gambia, I don't think the media or the media institution is respected enough to make a living to where you're independent-minded, make that living, and then still contribute to developing your country as far as educating people and making sure they're well informed. And whoever it angers, they can get to help, or you care less, right, about that. It doesn't work like that in our country. For example, look at in America here, you have CNN, MSNBC, right, through advertisements, right, through making millions and billions of dollars, right, they're able to retain any expertise they want, any expertise in the world. Why? Because the American media is structured in a way where there's so much wealth in it. Why is it there's so much wealth in it? Because of those advertisements, you have a vibrant economy. You have the private sector advertising, even though now you have social media where anybody can go in and start your own channel, your brand. You don't need Diasporium, you don't need Gainako, you don't need Fatu Network, you don't need Freedom Radio, you don't need GRTS. Just go open a page, start your own Facebook or YouTube channel. You're independent. You're on your own, right? But you can see, regardless, here in the United States, right, the news media is so independent and can wield its own financial capacity. And that financial capacity allows it to retain, right, experts in journalism, allows them to at least be independent-minded in their own view as far as hosting their own shows, formulating their own opinions, right? As long as they can conform to the direction of where that media itself, the media house, like for example, CNN would want to be. If you're a liberal view or you want to be independent or you're conservative, right? They're experts in that. Not only that, you have professors who teach journalism, right? Who are not afraid to be biased based on their knowledge and view of where the United States should be economically, national security-wise, right? It's politics, right? Name it. You see them. They book, spots to come to radio shows and TV shows. They write books, right? So the old guard, if they can't participate in this new era of journalism or of news dissemination, they can write books, right? They can write books. I mean, they have knowledge. I mean, those books, my type can rely on that. If they cannot be heard, I'll make sure they get heard when those books are printed, when those books are published, right? So but I think what we need to do is for the GPU, every media house come together and figure out a solution to be financially free, financially independent. If we're not going to be financially independent for now, there should be a sum of money that is part of our budget to ensure that the news media, yes, it can take money from the government, but then too, there are laws and regulations that should make sure that there is no conflict of interest as far as holding that government accountable.
Thanks ever so much, Babu. We've only got about a few minutes to go. If the panelists don't mind, we would extend by another 15 minutes. But thanks ever so much. Economic realities versus journalists' integrity is at play here, and thanks also for highlighting that point. I guess the journalists have got their code of conduct and ethics, so it's a very difficult balancing act, but we continue to fight and we continue to ensure that matter what the pressure, what the pressures are. I was just going to say, no matter what the pressures are, that integrity is maintained, and that is the solution that we will continue to fight for, and would encourage all of you to liaise with the GPU to ensure that you find solutions for a better field for journalists in the Gambia.
Can I throw something else in there, please?
Yep.
On the issue of the media being biased, we need to wake up to certain realities, right? Majority of human beings now that consume news through social media. Mm-hmm. That's just a fact, right? But what does that do? It has changed the narrative. It has changed the narrative both for the mainstream media, and it has changed the narrative against politicians or the government, and how this is how it's happening. For example, let's say Diasporium goes to social media, or I go to social media. I'm already biased. What am I biased for or against? What I'm biased for is that I don't belong to any political party. I don't have any political interest, but I believe the Gambian people are being taken advantage of. The Gambian people are taken advantage of by not being well informed. Okay, if you are a media house on social media, are you more interested in creating a partisan view to build a social media following that allows you to insulate yourself by targeting a particular view? Let's say you target the government, right? But then you're not really targeting the government as an institution. What you're doing is you're targeting personalities of the government. When you target personalities of the government, what happens? What happens is you're building a hub, an insulation hub, protected by people who believe and think the same way and share the same views as you do when it comes to holding personalities, inside of the government. So what happens at the end of the day, you're not only insulating yourself so that you can print any nonsense that you want. You can write any nonsense that you want because you're following. And that is the nature of social media now, because your following has already insulated you to do that. And once you do that, you become biased. It's so obvious. Yeah. You become biased.
Okay, but Babu, I'll have to take one of our panelists as well, who's got to leave. And before they leave, Madam Fatou Jan Senghor, just before you leave, we'll want to discuss. Babu's just talked about social media. We will also want to discuss GRTS and accessibility of GRTS and the quality of the programs that GRTS is airing at the moment. Have journalists got access to GRTS? Have the citizens got access to air their views in over GRTS? And the quality of programming, especially around the election cycle as well. We've talked a lot about biases today. Is GRTS still seen as a biased institution, biased towards the view of the state, biased towards the people who hold the purse strings? What can you tell us, Madam Senghor? And also learning lessons from the subcontinent, what advice can you give as well to those journalists working for GRTS, but other journalists as well who would want to sell their programs to GRTS with regards to sensitization and voter education across this election cycle? Over to you, Madam Senghor.
Thank you very much, Sose. Wow, that's a big program. I think that's as if you were within the House. I think this is the reform program that you're talking about.
Yes.
Of course, GRTS had very difficult past, we all know, like most of the public institutions. I think we followed the Janneh Commission. We've known how public institutions were run in that country. And I think GRTS, as a matter of legacy, is confronted. I must also disclose, for people who don't know, the board chair. And what we are trying to do here, three things, to bring back GRTS to be a public service broadcaster that it had never been, to ensure that, and that you do it through reforms. And as part of the reform package, which was proposed by civil society, the reform of the GRTS Act was part of it. As you know, overall, the reform has not been materialized. We are pushing, like we are pushing, all of us, for the Constitution, for other media laws, for the access to information. And we missed the point. We missed a very important milestone last year to reform some of the institutions and passing those laws. Currently, GRTS is grappling with, I think some of the details will be maybe the management. I will urge you to invite for next panel, maybe the manager, the director general, or some of the key staff. As a board, there are a few things that I can say. Our commitment to ensuring that GRTS is progressively transformed into a public service broadcaster. That is our commitment, and we are working on. As we speak, GRTS has editorial policy, which allows all access. Now, from the theory to the practice, I think you have a big gap. And as you can see from the early days after the change, you've seen a lot of access from civil society, from opposition, and you hear a lot of challenge that. And I do believe that we don't have another way out. We will have to continue that. GRTS is for the Gambian, for the Gambians. It's a taxpayer money institution. It is to be reformed. We are in the process of reforming it. In that, we are in an election year. So concretely, as we speak, about a few days ago, GRTS is back on satellite. After almost 3 to 4 years, you couldn't even believe that GRTS was not on satellite. We were not. So GRTS is a neglected institution. For obvious reasons, the former regime was using GRTS as a dumping ground. They overloaded the institution to staff that are not relevant. As we speak, we are overstaffed like many public institutions, and that demands a lot of government overhaul, packaging, looking at how to make a redundancy package, support staff who will be retrained, and helping them to so it's really a big transformation that this institution needs. Whilst we are doing all those big lifting, we need also to manage the day-to-day. And now we are in an election year. As we speak, the managers are working very hard to try and refurbish. GRTS has not gotten any investment since the AU summit in 2006. Can you imagine? So they don't have enough equipment. And on top of that, the government opened up the airwaves to other private media who has their own telecom kind of license, who are also dominating parts of the advertisement market. And that creates a lot of also uncertainties for many private broadcasters and also for GRTS. But having said that, there's no excuse in terms of election year. The public service broadcaster must be leading. And I hope that with the advice or from all stakeholders, and also we as the board, we are very clear that GRTS must play its role, allowing all Gambians to have access, informing, and ensuring that they play a critical role. So the steps are taken. Now, the first thing has been that we are back on satellite. They are reorganizing internally. And I'm sure in the next coming weeks, you will hear a lot of innovation recruitment of very key important staff who can, do some of this key work that we're doing. We are motivating internally also the good staff really to step up. And I think most of the African broadcasters also, the main problem is that some of these veterans also, they relegate themselves into administrative roles, or they are taken to other roles because the media is vulnerable. Our business models in the media sector across Africa, and Gambia is not an exception, is very, very difficult. So people, the industry doesn't also provide a lot of safety nets for people, especially when they're getting old, because you need, a lot of protection. So the public service is relatively the better because at least you have some protection, you have, security of employment, and you can have little advantages here and there. But in a nutshell, GRTS is our home. We all need to use it. We all need to work towards getting it to a better place. Obviously, we are not naive. There is a political interference like any other public broadcaster across the continent. But we need to minimize the political interference, especially during election, to ensure that the institution stands, allow people for diversity of views, get all sides of the stories. But obviously, a public service broadcaster will never be able to do like a private entity, especially in a transformative stage. Like we are transforming the culture in the house has to change. There is a lot of overhaul that needs to happen, but we are hard on the job. So we also need to get people to be proactive. The opposition, we call them also to come forward, inform the directors, ensure that they put in their requests for coverage. They should also be allowed to organize debates. Then they are working on some of those new programs to be able to host important debate. And we are also grappling with manpower, or I would say human resources, because some of those also issues that are very sensitive, high level, you need also to host them in a way that will help the public to move forward, not to create frustration. So they are really trying, the management, they're trying to really come up with new programs with the new satellite that is up there. So we have confidence in them. So we are monitoring very closely. This is a commitment we are taking as a board, as a human rights person, as a free expression. Since I joined the board, we were able to assist and to push for at least some of these internal processes to start. So now that we are getting somewhere, we hope that the new programs will help at least to bring back the public to GRTS and for GRTS to continue move forward. It's a long process, but until the law is changed that is governing the institution, until investment is done by the public, by the government, the enough investment, you will still have a public broadcaster that will not be able to fulfill its role. So we are hoping that the law will be changed so that it will give it a more stable status as a public service broadcaster, independent from all interference. But another way also of doing it, ensuring that also its financing is quite stable, and because a public service cannot depend on advertisement like the private entity. And once you do that and allow it require independence to hire professionals and organize internally, I think you help the institution to grow and to be able to respond to the public needs. But so far, it's not ideal, I must say. We are grappling with a lot of difficulties, including political, but we are also getting a lot of good signals that all the stakeholders, including the government, that they understand that in this election period, the public service must be open to all stakeholders. Please, let's come up with good programs that will help the public service also to cover, like in terms of the civil society, the opposition. Please use GRTS, ask for coverage, push the institution also to deliver. It's not for only the board or the government, but I think it's our institution. We need to push it to be accountable to everybody. So everybody has a role to play to ensure. And I'm very happy that you feel that GRTS has a big role, and you will be monitoring that. And I think that will put us on our toes.
Thank you very much, Sister Fatou, for enlightening us on the development from the GRTS, and for appealing for us to hold them accountable in order to support their delivery, which is very important. And we just have a few more minutes to go, and we'll do the last round. And I'll try and get MS Ba, the Vice President of the Gambia Press Union. MS. MS is in Basel. Probably he's having problems to connect. May I try Mr. Aliou Famara Sanyang? Mr. Sanyang.
Yes, Ben. Thanks.
Yes, considering our discussion today, what would you register as success and the perceived challenges we have in the present state of affairs with covering the registration and the election cycle?
I'm not sure I'm qualified to talk about that. I think I have said that I'm now with the RRC. The past almost 3 years, I have not been actively engaged or working for the media.
Okay.
What they call it, as I said earlier, the journalists involved in the media houses, their editors and their proprietors would be in a better position to tell us what challenges they face in terms of going out there to report on the registration process. But if you allow me, since we are at the end of this thing, I was going to point out that I would have loved that you gave us more chance since we were able to get connected here, so that we can we can share our views with the panel. Okay, considering that as I said, we started late. Nevertheless, we have been able to explain that as far as we are concerned, we think that the capacity is there in country and at the level of media houses, even with the public broadcaster GRTS, they had a lot of experience in this area. And as I said earlier, when come closer to the election day, they would have all prepared themselves, whether it's the private media, whether it's the public media, to go out there and do a decent job of covering these elections. Okay? Yes. Finally, let me just say that I want to thank Babu Joe. I listened to him, what he said about the situation, his comments and the explanation of the situation of veterans in Gambia. The fact that media houses need to put aside maybe some money to be able to make better use of these veterans, in terms of assisting them to do the job. But again, we're talking about money there. Of course, we are all aware of the situation of media all over the world, whether it's in Gambia, whether it's even in America, where people are that and they're all crying, about not having enough resources, to keep people on board, and to detain their staff and much more to talk about hiring other guys. Okay. But again, as I said, Bible definitely explained our situation very clearly, and then it's up to the media houses to see how they can make use of the veterans around, so that they can help advise and train their journalists to go about doing this particular task of covering these elections, doing elections, so that they do a decent job. I could recall that in our old days, we used to not only cover the processes, whether it's the registration, whether it's the voting the itself, but we also ensure that we give adequate coverage to the reports of election monitors, whether they are foreign, like the ECOWAS, African Union, and so on and so forth, and also the local, civil society organizations. We go out to monitor this. We ensure that when their reports are out, we put those reports, read them, and then put it through, and then reported on the contents of those reports. Okay, so these are all things that these media houses should watch out for. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Silent. Mr. Diajao. Mr. Silent, if you just mind to mute. Thank you. Mr. Diawo, considering you on the ground, observing from the news outlets, what would you consider a success story now? And what do you think is the constraints for journalists delivering an effective work?
Well, success story is definitely there, but the very fact that the journalists, despite all the constraints they are going through, they are still continuing to give information to the public. Well, that itself is a success. And of course, there are, as I said, a lot of constraints as well. Capacity is one of them. Also, it's unfortunate that Gambian journalists, most of us actually want to have it easy, but rather than going out to strain ourselves to get story, you would rather maybe go to the courts or to workshops or something and then just get a story from there and then have it published and get the money at the end of the month. I think we need to go beyond that state. But definitely there are lots of success stories as well as a lot of concerns as well. And I agree with Mr. Job, Babu Job, that just like Mustafa said, we have veteran journalists around. They have a lot of experience as well, and they are underutilized at the moment. And I see no reason why the various media houses and journalists cannot utilize the experiences of those veterans who are around. They can be able to advise. They can be able to help in a lot of ways. But unfortunately, most of us are sitting down, not being utilized much to help in the situation. But I think it can be done, and I see no reason why we cannot be more involved as journalists at present.
Thank you, Mr. Yao. Mustafa Kedabo. Mustafa. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, Mustafa, considering the issues that you have raised, the challenges on the ground, what recommendations you think you can advice you can give to your colleagues on how to consolidate on the little that have been achieved? Going towards the end of this registration and to the elections of the presidents in December.
I think the first thing is in the media houses, in terms of management of media houses. The media house managements and how media houses are established need to be transformed. Because we're used to a certain kind of reporting that needs to change. How newsrooms are managed, what kind of people do we hire, how do we do the hiring, how do we do resource mobilization. Those are very important, significant factors that probably need to go through some form of changes. For example, one thing, we know, like for example, if you look at how resource mobilizations are done, you see that usually media houses are advertisement dependent, but we know that's not the only model. For example, if you have premium times in Nigeria, for example, they rely a lot of they have a model that utilize donor funding in investigative journalism. You have the DOZE, for example, in Austria, Vienna. They rely on donor funding. They have a model that allows them to rely on donor funding. You have organizations like OCCRP, and you have tons of organizations out there that encourage investigative journalism and allow journalists to tap into their funding to be able to carry out investigative journalism. I think what we need to do is to get more journalists to be interested in investigative journalism. It's nice to be very famous on Facebook, but it's better to be remembered for a good work. And journalists would need to be to understand that. And then probably we can also organize some kind of a coaching kind of a system in this country. I know a lot of people at my age are very famous, probably more famous than the old ones because their time happens to be the Facebook generation. But it does not work like that. I think that there is a need for the old ones to work more in hand with the young ones, even if it's going to be newsroom management kind of capacity. It's important, that kind of coaching. But then the issue of also funding. I think media houses need to put a lot of their funds into the development of content, because media exists to serve the people. If it does not serve the people in ways that improves their lives, then there is no reason for media to exist. So if all that the media continues to do is to go to Kande and ask him about his opinion of Dabo, and go to Dabo and ask him about his opinion of Barrow, then what's the purpose for the media to exist? So this is the issue, and I think the media would need to also raise funds whichever way they can. And you can also divorce media, the news desk, away from the advertisement department. So, for example, in places where you have, even where you are not approaching things through the Malagan model, where we don't do advertisement, we don't seek funds from anybody. The only people we seek funds from are organizations, and we are also going to go into crowdfunding much later, probably. But when people see that you are doing content on their behalf and for their good, they contribute to it. There are actually news organizations in the world that are operating on crowdfunding basis. They go tap in crowdfunding and then utilize those crowd funds and to do investigations. And so if for example, you don't want to do that, you can also seek funding from news organizations, but make it clear to them that your advertisement department, as much as it complements the efforts of the news desk, it's not together. They make independent decisions. The editors are independent in their own rights, and that they're utilizing these funds to make sure that independent journalism is available. It's possible. Then there would be a lesser issue of interference. Yeah. So aside from that, also we need to get more people owning media houses. I mean, now media houses owning media houses to understand that media, it's a public service job.
Yeah.
And unless we understand it that way, it's a public service job. You're not going into media to be the next Aliko Dangote. I mean, you're going into media to serve the people. So if you go into media to be the next Aliko Dangote, that's what you will get. You will get name, you will get famous. You may, hopefully, thank God, you may have resources, but then you will not be celebrated as Edward Francis Small was, or as people after him were, and and things like that. So I think we need to get people to also buy into that kind of an idea, having a media house that it's not just profit oriented, but that's public service delivery oriented. And then also probably, I don't know whether this model of getting government to fund media content will work, because we've seen how media houses manage those funds. I mean, you look at the COVID funds, for example. I mean, we refuse to take it at Malagan on simple basis, but then you have media houses that took it and then spent it on, they can't even justify what they spent it on. I mean, we have media houses in this country that took COVID funds from government, and you don't even know what they spent it on. So you have media managers also who manages media, but they don't even pay their staff. I mean, so I see a lot of complaints about people blaming journalists, I mean, a lot of us who stay in the media and for a very long time, it's because we have some freelance obligations with some media houses outside of the Gambia. A lot of people, look at the attrition rate. They wouldn't even approach these very top guys in the media because they know they can't keep them on their wages. Yes. So the media also needs to improve on how much they pay for content, and if you know that, you will be sorry for some of these journalists we blame. I mean, we all blame each other on Facebook everywhere, but that the resources that the journalists have need to also get improved.
Thank you very much, Mustafa. We had you there, and you have raised very valid points on content, the importance of the content to sell your sell the news, and get viewers, and from there on one can get funding from crowdfunding or other ways of making the business sustainable, rather than to aspire to be a billionaire or millionaire from the business, as it's a public service duty. And I just move on to Demba Balde Ngainako. Demba.
Yes, Sir Ben, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I want you to follow up from things that Mustafa have raised, and the quality of news, information coming out. And I just want us to reflect onto our neighbor Senegal. We have seen the quality of panels, discussions organized, and we don't lack the people in the country. As we said, veteran journalists and then other people who are experienced in all forms of life, to be seen taking part in the discussions, and the area of looking. I mean, how do we get this digital divide in the sense of a generation? Probably most young journalists or young people in the media, some of them might not even be journalists, are famous, or they can get more attention because of it's their generation. How can this be done? What are your ideas to help them improve the situation?
Yeah, unfortunately in Gambia, the media, as everybody mentioned, fraternity is not very attractive in terms of living conditions or in terms of generating revenue, right? Mm-hmm. And therefore, a lot of people they shy away from it. As we mentioned earlier, these veteran journalists, you can see that some of these media, some of us, we could organize some programs for these just veteran journalists, like on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis. For example, people like Uncle Die or people like Mr. Sanya, do a program, right? I mean, to talk about, the history of journalism, talk about, whatever they want to talk about, that can be done. But most of the times what you see is these sensational programs on our social media platforms, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, most of our media houses now are heavily social media based. You see these sensational media programs that are not very, very educative. They're more like about shouting matches or talking about politics here and there. I mean, when actually we have veteran journalists in the Gambia that can champion, programs, on this. I talk to my guy all the time. You see Flex, Gainako all the time. Yeah. And yes, as journalists, we have to also have a business mindset. If you're running a media house, you have to have a business mindset, because without the revenue, you cannot sustain yourself. I mean, I said, don't do anything for free, right? Because in order for you to survive, you have to have some revenue. You have to put food on the table. How does your media survive if you cannot, secure advertisements, right? If you cannot generate revenue, if you cannot pay your staff, how do you survive if you cannot be paid as a journalist? So I think we need to create that partnership where, there is no longer free publicity. I mean, we get inboxes all the time on Gainako. People are saying, can you publish this with me? Or they tag us. We don't take those things. I mean, the media need to be, need to have a business mindset, right? And, and we go out there and go to businesses and say, hey, here is a product that I'm selling. I mean, can you patronize us? Can we partner here? I mean, I talk about even the National Assembly, members of the National Assembly, they all have budgets. I mean, they have budgets. The city of Banjul, the mayor, have a budget, and that budget, there should be a budget line for the media. Every one of us, for example, Tumanjai, could have a media budget that she can use, to the media. So, but the media has to demand this, and we have to really have that business mindset to be able to generate revenue. I mean, we refuse to take the COVID money as well from the government, because I mean, what do they do with it? As Mustafa said, what do they do with that money? I mean, you don't see it anywhere. This is one of the reasons why we refuse to take it as well. But every media house is pretty much struggling in the Gambia in terms of revenue. But there is revenue in the Gambia. We just have to tap into it. We have to tap into it. There are businesses running in the Gambia. All those businesses could sponsor the media. We just have to stop issuing free publicity. We're doing that a lot of the times. I think we need to stop that. And, in terms of closing here, I know we are running out of time. I really want to see the Media Commission or the GPU work on organizing training sessions for the journalists for this election coverage. And I would also like us to venture into perhaps organizing, debates, debates for candidates. I mean, we have to demand these things to come to the forefront. And obviously we need to, continue to pursue the information, access to information bill in the National Assembly to make sure that these things are delivered. I thank you all, for being a part of this panel. It was a privilege, to be a part of all of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Demba. I knew we would have run out of time because we have journalists on the panel. We always been on our 2 hour mark. Not the least, but Babu, if we can have you take on the issues raised on sustainability, issues raised on content, quality, effectiveness, and as you have alluded or stated earlier about how to make these things journalists independent.
I'm hearing some background. I don't know if someone else.
Mr. Sajan, can you mute, please?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm aghast by the idea that when government gives us funds, we're supposed to reject it based on the mismanagement of others, right? I've always said nobody is above the law in our country. Journalists are not above the law. Political parties are not above the law. Everybody is up for scrutiny. We like to scrutinize government, but that's an avenue for government to scrutinize us as well. I totally reject the view that if the government gives us $50 million, let's say, and any one of us mismanages that money, we should go to jail. It's as simple as that. There should be a tool to investigate that money went for the purpose that it was distributed by the government. I'm sick and tired of this idea that when certain people in a sector or a category of our society mismanages opportunities, mismanages channels of sustainability, all of us have to suffer because a certain group of people decided to do whatever they wanted. This has happened in government. You have intellectuals that go into government, PhD holders, master's degree holders. They become incompetent in their duties. And then every intellectual has to suffer for that. And then there's no accountability as to those intellectuals going to jail because they broke laws. They became criminals in the capacity of government. But we excuse them and then allow that image for everybody in that category of leadership to suffer. So we have to change that mentality. When money is given to the media, that money should be scrutinized as far as its spending. Where did it go? If you make people work in Gambia and you don't pay them, you should pay the consequences for that. You're violating the labor laws, right? So we should avoid being victims of others' mismanagement and for their mismanagement to become our reality, right? When some of us don't act like that, some of us don't think like that. Some of us, in fact, take money out of our pockets to make sure people are paid, right? So we cannot be stained by those who don't like laws, who believe they're above the laws. Government gives you resources. You want to hold accountable the government, but you don't want anybody to hold you accountable. That's nonsensical. So the government should be able to not be restrained by people saying we're not taking money from government because we don't know how to be ethical about taking money from the government and still doing our job holding accountable that government. If some of us can't be ethical enough, it doesn't mean majority of us are. We have a GPU for goodness sake. We have media laws for goodness sake. We have labor laws for goodness sake. Who's enforcing them? Nobody. So we allow people to break laws anytime they want, and then all of us suffer. The other part of foundation funding, actually media funding, there's not enough corporate responsibility in Gambia. Our corporations are corrupt, biased already. We know they're funding political parties underneath, right? But then there's no disclosure of that. There's no transparency in that, right? We see so many millions entering the political space, but we don't know where those millions come from. A political party or a politician can be dirt poor. On an election cycle, the party is dirt rich. Where is that funding coming from? Who's following that funding and where it is coming from? None of us, right? So we're influenced in different ways to where it's the media that's almost encouraging for itself to be hampered, right? But I believe there should be some kind of a funding system or mechanism where we encourage transparency. It should be by law that when you donate to the media, it must be disclosed. When you donate to the political parties, it must be disclosed. These are things that we can easily do. These are laws that we can ensure are in our books. Some of us that hold accountable leaders, we're not above the laws, right? Where we get our funding should be disclosed. The Gambian people should be knowing, for example, what Mustafa said. How can you be in journalism and then offering public services and think you can be a billionaire or a millionaire? Where are you getting that funding? Are you paid to be biased? Are you paid not to be confrontational about the issues that should educate the Gambian people? How are you surviving? How are you sustaining your media house? None of us are above scrutiny. We should be scrutinized. But then two, the people who fund us, we should understand, or the people who give us that money, we should understand what their motives are. Are we honest enough, ethical enough that if somebody gives us the money, we will go to our own newspapers and say this is the reason why they gave us the money? I doubt it. I don't see that happening in our news media. We can try to be independent and sustainable, but we all know that money comes from sources. We can go have crowdfunding. That's great. That's the new way of doing it. All right. But then if the people are biased and we're creating insulating hubs, trust me, you can have people who only fund you because you agree, or they agree with you holding accountable somebody else other than their leaders. The moment you hold accountable their leaders and the institutions that they ascribe to and loyal to, that funding goes dry. So we have to educate the Gambian people that giving your money to giving your money to institutions, the media, doesn't mean you can control them. You give that money to separate your interest from the money. That is, if you're not biased and you want to be well informed. So the idea that, oh, government can give us money and control us is nonsense, right? The idea that somebody can donate you money and control you is nonsense, right? We have laws, we have ethics that we should follow. So we have to be sustainable in many ways. We should open channels, like Mustafa said. There's so many other channels of funding. But those channels of funding, anybody who's going to be the resource of those channels of funding should understand you cannot buy the media. You cannot control the media. The media doesn't ascribe to you. Right? That should be made very clear. And I don't know why we're afraid of that.
Thank you. Bob, if you want to take a little bit of content.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you. Sorry.
How to generate better content?
How to generate better content?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's back to Mustafa's point. We have to dig. I am of the view that the best content is the content that you dig as it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, having access to the facts, and those facts, where do you find them? How do you find them? Do you have the resources to go find them? My type of reporting, or the type of analysis that I give, I mean, if I was to recruit young minds in Gambia right now, young journalists, people will tell them, oh, don't work for Diasporium. There was a time I was paying about $300 per story back in Gambia, $300 per story. But guess what? They would just go somewhere, copy and paste, and give it back to me. Before I realized what was happening, they were plagiarizing other people's articles, right? Bringing them into Diasporium. All right? So at the end of the day, in Gambia, for example, you have the Associated Press in the United States. The Associated Press, what does it do? It goes source the news as the facts are. And then anybody else can grab it if you're members of the Associated Press, and then you formulate your own angle of analysis that you want to use to inform your readership or your viewership. In Gambia, we should build an institution that has access to the facts. And those facts, many of us can go to it and choose which angle we want to disseminate more or have more onto, and then educate the Gambian people on those facts. Because if we operate individually, and we are thin on resources, right? At some point, we can't get the access to those facts and content writing. So at the end of the day, I hope the GPU would, take it upon itself to figure out how we can be more sustainable in resource management, resource gathering capacity, especially, and then kind of marry all of that together, and then see what we can do to educate the Gambian people. But I can tell you at this moment, nobody is in monopoly of content. Nobody, right? Look at all the political parties right now that you see in Gambia. They all have social media pages. They don't need to come to me. They don't need to come to you, Ben. They don't need to go to Gainako or Freedom Radio, right? if they disagree with our opinions or they disagree with the facts that we have dug about them, all they have to do is just counter that through their Facebook pages. That's all they have to do. But because we have managed to be a partisan country right now, based on different views for many different reasons, right? It's all about who you agree with and who you follow and where you're going to get your content. I can write the best content out there, but who would care to read it if that content criticizes your political party or your leader or the government that you support? Would you care to read it? No. Would you even care to share it? No. Because the moment you do that, you're enabling me, right, to keep your leaders more transparent, more honest. So you wouldn't do it. You will see it, you will read it, ignore it, right? And then make sure nobody else would see it, right? So these are things that we need to understand is happening, that nobody is in monopoly of content anymore. Nobody.
Thank you, Babu.
Thanks ever so much, Babu. Thanks, Suleiman. Can I take this opportunity to thank all of our panelists for their time and their contributions in this discussion as we march ahead towards the December 2021 elections. We also ask, are the citizens being informed? Are the citizens being informed from a position of truth? Are the citizens accessing all of the information that is available? We thank you all. We thank our listeners. We thank everyone who's made this program possible. Thanks ever so much, Suleiman, for your time and your brilliant hosting. Thanks to the organizers of this program as well. December 2021 is around the corner. We rely on journalists to give us the correct information. We rely on the powers that be as well to ensure that the terrain for which journalists have got to ply their trade is a level playing field. We ask those in power to ensure that the draconian laws that are holding back the pens of our journalists are repealed from our books. We ask for media reforms, and we continue to fight for a democratic Gambia, because as long as we've got draconian media laws, we cannot stand and beat our hands on our chests and say we are a democratic nation. We are walking towards democracy. We are marching towards democracy, but we are not there yet. Until next week, I thank you for your time. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.